So I wanted to share with you something which I was meant to share with you last week. I promised I'd share with you, but I forgot. So I'll share with you this week. It was a quote from Shlomo Alkabetz, who was a Kabbalist and a poet. I think he was in Tzfat. He composed Lecha Dodi, and this is taken from Roland's book, actually, forthcoming. Zot Hashem, we give him Hatzlacha with it. So let me read it from what he sent me. So Shlomo Alkabetz writes, "It seems that Rav Ilah interpreted the verse in the Song of Songs, quote, 'Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth,' as referring to the secrets of the Torah. And the meaning of Rav Ilah is that there are subjects about which man refrains from speaking, but only contemplates, for these are the things on which his lips are sealed. And as it is known to the Kabbalists that there are various levels, one is called speech, because only he who is worthy may speak properly about them. And there is a level called thought, on which the lips are sealed. And there is a level called annihilation of thought, because the thought within and upon it is in a state of running and returning, Ratzu Vashov. As it was said in the Gemara in Chagiga, 'Seek not the things that are too hard for you, and search not out things that are hidden from you. The things that have been permitted you, think thereupon. You have no business with the things that are secret.'" So that the last bit was a pasuk we looked at, was a section from the really, I think it was a book Ben Sirah, Sefer Ben Sirah. I think it's quoted from there in Gemara there. We looked at it, we saw it in right at the beginning of this whole series in the Hakdama Pticha of the Radzina Rebbe, the third Ishbitzer Rebbe, where he talks about Muflama Mecha La Tidrosh. I think that's the right words. We're not allowed to inquire about things which are above us. And this is again what the Rav Tzadok also brings in the Sefer Yetzirah, which I keep referring to because I think it's a crucial text, critical source of this teaching. And this thing which is above us is that really above our sense of self, our sense of identity, which is why and this is why the Sfirot, Olam Atzilut, they are beyond our sense of self. They require a transcendence of ourselves. This is the upper unity, the Maaseh Merkava, which as again Rabbi Tzadok says, it's complete bitul b'metziut mamash. It's complete the cessation of self, the annihilation of self. There is no being there. Just like we saw a few weeks ago that God tells Moshe, "No one can see my face and live." You cannot see my face because no one can see my face and live, because in order to see God's face, you're seeing the inner. Panim is essence also, the inside. That means that there is nothing else. Seeing God's panim means you can't see God's panim. It's just physically impossible, because there's nothing to see. There's no being to see. In that sense, there's no sense of separateness. There's no sense of there is a seer and a seen. God can't be the object of a perception like that, because God is the essence of existence. Like we see before, He is your life and the life of your days in Parashat Nitzavim. So that's why this idea of that which is beyond you, it's meaning you as in the small you, as in the little you, that you which is separate, that you which feels existence, that is transcended in Maaseh Merkava, an upper unity, and only God exists. So that's why when God appeared to Moshe, He showed him His back, Achorai. So just like we see when I come home from work or whatever it might be, or from being on a business trip, and I come back and I can see the achan that my family's not home. I can see the acharai of my family. I can see the consequences of my family being there. We go out to the forest or whatever it might be, and we can see oftentimes the consequences of people being there. So that's saying in the same sense of the universe, God can show, or with God as well, Hashem can show us his actions in the world. He can show us the consequences of his existence. So actually the whole universe itself is the consequence of God's existence. It's like the footprint of God. So we can see the footprint, that which indicated that there was a being here, there was something here. But you can't see the foot itself because this foot is not separate from anything else. In Makom Shel Olam, like we've seen as well. So Shuv LaMakom means returning to the place of the universe. And when we return to the place of the universe, then we're not there anymore. There's a bittul there. Actually, 1 minute, I think I might share with you something that Roland also sent me, because I think that's also connected to it. Also refers to Afisat HaMachshava. Let me go into it. So this is from Azrael of Girona, who was a very early student. I think he was a direct student of the Yitzhak Sagi Nahor, Isaac the Blind. Really the main teacher of Kabbalah in the Middle Ages. So he was from Girona, Azrael of Girona. Isaac the Blind was from Provence, but they had a correspondence across the Pyrenees in some way. So this is from him. Therefore, the early pietists, the Hasidim Rishonim, the Hasidim Rishonim are the people who lived before the Purushim, before the Pharisees. This is the time of the Second Temple, the early Second Temple, when story of Hanukkah. They were the Hasidim Rishonim. So therefore, when the Hasidim Rishonim would uplift their thought until the place of its source, Roland's put here is from Brachot, this, so we have to maybe read them up very nice and look it up. And have in mind the mitzvot and the words, and from the concentration and exceptionally cleaving thought to the words would be blessed. Expand and receive the influx from the afisat machshava, from the annihilation of thought, the cessation of thought. So let me repeat the whole thing, it's a bit confused. Therefore, the early pietists would lift up their thought until the place of its source, and would have in mind the mitzvot and the words, and from the concentration and exceptionally cleaving thought to the words, or not to the words, but the words would be blessed, expand, and receive the influx from afisat machshava, from the annihilation of thought, like someone who makes an opening in a pool of water, and it spreads this way and that, because the cleaving thought is the source, the pool and the spring that does not cease. So there's obviously talking about dvikud, but the idea that it brings the idea of afisat machshava and the clinging to the pool. So there's another, I think there's in it's like the min akari has, I think, the same idea of, Ron, you'll be able to tell me about this one, about the jug, pouring the jug of water into the sea. Is that from Yitzhak? That's Isaac of Akka, right?
That's Isaac of Akka. Very famous quote.
Yeah. So it's the same principle, and that's the idea of the complete bitul mitzvot. It's a bitul mitzvot is a Hasidic terminology, but it's the same principle that they refer back to, and it's when the water from the jug it's poured into the sea and it becomes the same as the sea. So there's no room for separation there. So that's why we've seen in this idea of Maaseh Merkavah, this idea of upper unity and the upper waters within the first section of the Sefer Yetzirah, as everything is one. There is this whole unity, the Adon Yachid, Brit Yachid, everything is one there, connected with Shuv and returning. And with Afisat HaMachshava, the annihilation of thought, the cessation of thought. with a chokhmah and atzilut as well. Same idea. So we saw last week how the Radzina and how the Zohar and how the Beit Yaakov was the second Radzina Rebbe, second Ishbitzer Rebbe, how he refers to how the Zohar and he refers to it as Ishtadluta de Oraita, the effort, the struggle in Torah. And actually expands it further on the Sefer Yetzirah, the Zohar there. He says, how does it explain this principle of Ishtadlut Deoraita, this effort, struggle of the Torah? It says, Ishtadluta de Kuchabricho lemindale, the effort of, call it the Holy Blessed One, or the Blessed Holy One, no, the Holy Blessed One, Kuchabricho, the Holy Blessed One, lemindale, to know him. And it says there, the Beit Yaakov, he explains there, or the Zohar actually explains that this Ishtadluta De'orata, Ishtadluta De'kucha Brichu Lemindale, this effort, this work, this endeavor, this striving to of the Torah, of the Holy Blessed One, to come to knowledge of Him. It says it's very easy. It's free. Anyone who wants it can go and acquire it for free. As the Zohar says that. And the Beit Yaakov explains with this really beautiful mashal of Matan Torah and how there was this effacement, there was a clarification of awareness, purification of consciousness, a purification of our awareness, and Hashem came down. He dissolved our passions and our desires and the Tardut Olam, the what's it called, distractions of this world. And then Mimela, he said, we heard the voice of creation. We heard the voice of God when our senses are quietened down. That's when we perceive that deeper sense. So this is and he says there, it's in a sense of sur mira. So we saw that opposite Ishtadlut Daraita is Ishtadlut, which the Gemara, actually Zohar doesn't say this. Rav Tzadok kind of he puts it there, but it's quite clear actually. Which we can say Ishtadluta the mitzvata, the striving of mitzvahs, Ishtadluta mitzvot. But actually, what the Zohar says there is Ishtadluta de kucha brichu de kaima be'ovada, the striving, just like it says about the striving of the Kadosh Baruch Hu, but it says it's not that to know Him, but it's that it is established in an action, to kaima be'ovada, established in an action. So that's opposite. Ishtadlut Deoraita, the effort towards Torah, which is free, and this Ishtadlut de Kaima Be'ovada is very hard. It's expensive. It requires effort and struggle in that. So, and Reb Tzadok says there, this Ishtadlut de Kaima Be'ovada is referring to mitzvot. So you can look at it as Ishtadlut de Mitzvota, Ishtadlut Mitzvot. But it's mitzvot aseh, the kaima be'ovada, that they are established in an action. So these are positive actions. The Gemara, like the Zohar says in other places, that when you do a single positive mitzvah properly, when you do it with the right attitude of love and of awe and fear, trepidation, included within that mitzvah is all 248 mitzvot. In one action book, he says really in reality every mitzvah taseh includes within it all other mitzvah taseh. So we know that we said that the mitzvah taseh corresponds to the parts of the body as well. But within each part of the body, therefore, what the Zohar is saying is included all the other parts of the body. And he says that when we do this in this particular way, not only does it include all the mitzvot, it also includes all the sefirot. The sefirot come and descend and dwell within that action that you've performed. But those are the mitzvot aseh. So, but what the Radzina says, he says that the ishtadlut, the kaim, the kuchabrichu lemindale, the effort of the effort of its divine service, I suppose is what it means. To know God, that's easy. All you have to do is sur mira, refraining from evil. It means that you just have to do nothing. It is an action of non-action. It is a doing of non-doing, or a non-doing. Allowing things to be like we've seen in HaTorah, Yeshiv Badad, which is the gematria of Yeshiv Badad V'Yidom, we don't have to do anything. Just Yeshiv Badad V'Yidom, you sit alone and you be silent, and on that, because of that, Notel Alav, you receive a schar from it. Chazal say in Perkei Avot that pasuk refers to Talmud Torah, so learning Torah. So to learning Torah, even though it's an active thing, it's a passive thing. So that's why we sit in yeshiva, Yoshvei Ohalim, we sit in tents. That's the idea of sitting and learning Torah. And it's tshuva, and it's Shabbat, which is a stillness and a returning. It is shuv lamakom, return to the place. It is yeshiv badad b'idam, sitting, learning, being silent. All of these ishtadut deoraita, the haTorah. And we saw that Torah is also Ratzu V'Shov. So Ratzu V'Shov we saw in Ashur Al-Kabetz before, that is Afisat HaMachshava is Ratzu V'Shov. But actually it's more of the Shov part of it, returning, Shuv Lamakom. So that is what we've seen in the first section of the Sefer Yetzirah, this idea of this working towards that bubble. Actually, what we see in the first section is there is a difference between Ishtadlut Deoraita and really the upper unity and Ma'aseh Merkava. Because Ma'aseh Merkava is almost like a description of a Mitziyut. It's a description of what is there, what is the experience of it, rather than what is the process towards it. So it's almost like the Ratzu V'Shov is, so the Shov is the Ma'aseh. So even though the Shov can be from anywhere, we can return from anywhere. So, and this as the Torah, we can return from anywhere we might be. Right, but the Ma'aseh Merkava is defined by the Afisat HaMachshava, the cessation of sense of self, the effacement of consciousness there. And everything else will therefore become part of Ma'aseh Bereshit. We see that Ma'aseh Bereshit is about the creation of the universe, Asra Ma'amarot, Aseret Dibarot, all this process and progressional production of the universe, the separation of the Sefirot into 5 opposite 5. With the Brit Mechuban Be'emtza, the Brit Ma'or, Brit Lashon, and all of these are language and actions which are part of the whole process of Ma'aseh Bereshit. So it's Ma'aseh Bereshit, Ma'aseh Merkava, kind of definitions, and even Sitra Ariyot are descriptions of mitziyut, of existence, of substance. Ratzu V'Shov, Ishtadlut Deoraita, Ishtadlut de Mitzvah, these are descriptions of processes which take us to one or the other. So Ishtadlut Deoraita, Sur Merah, refraining from evil, the returning, the Shuv, the Shuv Lamakom, those take us back to the Ma'as. They return us to Ma'aseh Merkava. They return us to that place of stillness, because in that place, the higher up we go, the less active, the less choice we've got, the less action we've got. We saw in the Radzina and the Hakdam, when we looked like the last week, the Hakdam, or in regarding upper waters and lower waters, that lower waters refers to choice, the requirement for choice. So we need to have a sense of separation, a sense of ego, a sense of distance from God in order for us to have a sense of choice. We can actually do something.
Yeah. Take care.
So,
I'm going to work out with you everything.
So what was I saying? What did I say about choice? I can't remember what I was saying about choice. I forgot now. I forgot why I mentioned choice. In any case, let's go. Let's backtrack a little bit. So the idea of Ma'aseh Merkava and Ishtadlut Deoraita, Ishtadlut the Mitzvah, Ishtadlut Deoraita returns us back to Ma'aseh Merkava. That's why I said let's back to Ma'aseh Bereshit is about it requires a sense of other, and that's why we have a sense of choice, so we can choose in that sense, and the other can choose. That's all part of the idea of Ma'aseh Bereshit. But from Ma'aseh Bereshit, we can still go back and return to Ma'aseh Merkava, to that sense of that experience. So what we're going to do, so even though we look, so if we look at the Sefer Yetzirah in this second section, in fact, let me just erase it in front of us so that we can see. Yep. Where am I? Where you go? Right. So in this section here, we can see how. So this is the second, still the first chapter. Actually, the wrong one. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. This one is section 2. This is still the first chapter of Sefer Yetzirah, but I've separated it because the first section, as in Mishnah 1 to 8, talk about Eser Sfirot and about the unity of the Sfirot, and this is where there is a separation of the Sfirot. So we see, even though the first one, so the Mishnah number 9, starts with Eser Sfirot, actually it then goes to say Achat. Eser Sfirot and then it says Achat. It's the same we find here. It starts the Mishnah number 10, Shtaim, then Shalosh, Arba, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 10 over here. And then all of them become enumerated over there. So this is, and again, we can see here as well. Again, just briefly, we're going to go into more detail later on. But we can see the beginnings of language: Kol, Ruach, Dibur. We can see here Chakak v'Chadzav. 22 אותיות יסוד, the letters start manifesting. Again, the letters in this section. Kaf bet otiyot yesod, kaf bet otiyot, 22 letters. We see form beginning to manifest, and so this, when the Sfirot kind of separate into start functioning independently, we see the what do you call it? Language manifesting. We see form coming into being. So we see, and what that means is it's not Apisat Machshava anymore. It's now Machshava and Dibur, right? So we saw in Shlomo Alkabetz at the beginning, there is language, there is Dibur, and there is Machshava, and there is Apisat Machshava. Right. So here we start seeing the beginning of language. But what we're going to do is, even though this is the beginning of Maaseh Bereshit, we're going to look at this from the perspective of stop sharing. We're going to look at it from the perspective of not of Maaseh Merkavah, sort of Maaseh Merkavah, but of Ratzu, of Vashov, of returning to silence, of Shuv Lamakom, of Ishtadlut D'Oraita. And we're going to do this even in the next section also, because we're going to start introducing meditation techniques, specific meditation techniques, and we're going to begin with the simple ones, and we're going to move into more complex ones in the next section number 3, because it's just more appropriate. That's where they start. You start to see them there. Again, from this point, we start having Ratzu Vashov. We start seeing the progress of Ratzu into Maaseh Bereshit, into the fruition of creation, Puruvu, go forth and multiply, be fruitful and multiply, and that movement of Ratzu, of the movement towards Maaseh Bereshit and the culmination of perfection of creation, that is the hard part, right? That is the Ishtadlut, the Mitzvah, Ishtadlut, the Kucha Bichot, the Kaima Be'ovada is established in action, and that is hard. That is about Agar Shalim. It says there. It's not acquired except with a full payment. And that is where the work is done. So actually, Beit Yaakov last week said it was easy, and this is why in meditation as well, spirituality, it's easy to have this experience of emptiness, of nothingness, of the transcendence. That's the easy part. The hard part is manifesting it in your life, in day-to-day life, and that's where the work comes in. So, I mean, even now it's hard because we have just a lot of tiradot, a lot of distractions of this world. So it's not as easy, but still, it's not too hard. It's not as hard as it is manifesting after. So the work begins after you have that experience of emptiness, of silence, of apisata machshava. Now the work begins. But in any case, we can make the work easier by looking at it from all the different angles and show how, from wherever we are, however distant we are, we can do sur mirah, shuv lamakom, and return. So that's kind of the direction we're going to be taking. And then once we've gone through these 6 Mishnah out there, the second section, we can start looking at, from the next section, we can start looking at the mitzvah, and see how we can start now manifesting God's will in the world. That's really the whole principle of it. How we can demonstrate in our actions that God exists in the world, that God is present and kaim there. But because we're here, that was just kind of introduction. Let's now look at two important things I think we should look at, especially when talking about Maaseh Merkavah, is actually looking at the Maaseh Merkavah, which is Ezekiel's vision, and reading it together, and seeing if we can find some stuff. So I'm not going to go into all the different interpretations of it. We're going to come back to it. We're going to see it as well. We're going to see what we've already seen in it as well. And then we'll look at the Rambam, his definition of prophecy, which I think for me is a critical kind of place to go. And we might bring some other ideas from Abelafi. I'm not sure. I haven't got the text of Abelafi to look at. Maybe I'll try to find it for next week. Bli neder. In any case, I'll mention it. And then possibly we can kind of look into more of what the Rambam talks about. But I think it's really important to see what the Rambam says about it. So let's move into that. I'm going to share a screen with you. I'm just going to find it. Okay, there it is. Right. So I just read it now. Okay. Okay. So here we go. So the Maaseh Merkavah, what is referred to as Maaseh Merkavah in the Gemara and in other sources, is referring really to the first chapter of Yechezkel. And this is the first chapter of Yechezkel, so let's read it. ויהי ב-30 שנה, ברביעי ב5 לחודש, ואני בתוך הגולה, על נהר כבר נפתחו השמיים ואראה מראות אלוקים. So I was in the 30th year. Now this little thing here, I don't know who wrote that this is, I don't know what 30th year it is. It's possible that it's his own 30th year, like he was 30 years old. That's kind of, if we don't know what it is, then it makes no sense to me. No reason why, because the next pasuk, it says, he Hashana Chamishit, the 5th year. So we have the 30th year here and the 5th year here. So what are they referring to? Well, this one's referring to the 5th year of the exile of the king Yoachim. So this is obviously not the year of the king, so it might be his own how old he was at the time. In any case, let's translate it. I was in the 30th, and it was in the 30th year on the 4th, on the 5th day of the 4th month, 5th day of the 4th month, on the 4th month, 5th day of the 4th month. 5th day, so the 4th month is, where's that, Tammuz? Is that right? Nisan. Yeah, Sivan Tammuz, yeah. So, 1 minute. Let's just check that. Sorry, a second. 1 second. What is the 5th month? Because I'm just thinking it'd be right around the time of the destruction of the temple, first temple. That would have been on Shiva Sava Tammuz. I'm correct there. I think it's the 4th month. Let me just go check my calendar. I'm getting confused. Yeah, Tammuz. That's what I thought. So he was on. It was the 5th day of the 4th month. So it was the 5th of Tammuz, which would have been. So it was. If it was the case that the 17th Tammuz was the destruction of the first temple, or the destruction, the breaching of something on those lines. Yes, I think it was. So maybe it was connected to that. I don't know. In any case, for the 5th day of the 4th month, I'm in exile. Al Nehar Kevar, I'm on the river Kevar. The heavens opened, the heavens opens, and I saw the visions of God. The visions of God. So I don't know if I mentioned. It's like, can somebody remind me if I mentioned this idea of Kevar before in this series? Do you remember? Anybody recall that?
No.
I don't remember. I wasn't planning on mentioning it. So goodbye. So Nahar Kevar, I think, is an interesting one. The Zohar says that the word Kevar means already, right? The word Kevar means already. So the Nahar Kevar, but I'm not going to interpret every single verse, by the way. I'm just going to go into this one because I wanted to mention it anyway. So the Zohar says that this Nahar Kevar was there, is the Nahar of already, meaning it was already there from the beginning. And so I think it's been seen as Nahar Dinur, which is Nahar Dinur's river of fire, which is the Milky Way, which has some special significance. There's Nahar Kevar, so this idea of Kevar means it was already there. That's why previously I looked at the idea that this stillness and the silence, and we close our eyes and we switch off the mind, we find ourselves back in Nahar Kevar, in the river of already, which was there from beforehand. The stillness that was already there. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. So he's standing in the middle of a river, right, or by the river, and the heavens open up and he sees the visions of God. B'chamisha l'chodesh he shana chamishit. Again, so it repeats it on the 5th day of the month and the 5th year. So that's why it says it's different to the 30th year. On the 5th year, legalut hamelach Yoyachin, in the 5th year of the exile of the king Yoyachin. Which is, again, that name is interesting. It just jumps off the page to me. Yoyachin means God prepares it. So God has prepared it. And you can go and take that home with you and think about that. Okay, Haya Devar Hashem in Ezekiel ben Buzi. So this is an important principle that we find. Eric Kaplan talks about it. So he says, first of all, he says right at the beginning, he had it happen on the 30th year, on the 5th of the 4th month. The heavens opened, and I saw the visions of God. And then it says, it repeats, there was, it happened. The word of God came to Yechezkel ben Buzi. So Ari Kaplan notes that when there is an experience of prophecy, there's always, at some point at least, it talks about in the third person, that the prophecy is describing himself in the third person. It doesn't say, at the beginning it says I, and now it changes to him, to he. Yechezkel ben Buzi, a Kohen, Beres Kasdim, in the land of the Chaldeans, on Nehar Kevar, on the river Kevar. But here, Alav Sham Yad Hashem, and the hand of God came upon him there. So he's talking about himself in the third person. So the Ari Kaplan notes, I can't remember which book it is, one of his books on meditation, that whenever there is prophecy, there is a transcendence of self, that the prophet experiences a transcendence of self, that he's no longer an individual, he's now observing himself, observing this being from afar, or this it is not him anymore. Again, this goes into the idea of the bitul b'mitziot, the transcendence of self that we saw in the tzadok. Okay, I think that's as far as I'm going to go with this. Maybe not.
I just looked up Kevar.
Yeah.
So just to mention, the root meaning is extensiveness. Read what you want into that. Extensiveness, yeah.
Oh well, yeah, beautiful, nice. I like that.
Extensiveness. So yeah, you can look at the details, but extensiveness, even multiplication kind of thing. But extensive.
Right, like expansive.
Not so clear. It'd be more interesting river of expansive, but certainly extensive river would be legitimate.
Okay. In any case, the Zohar does say Kevar, meaning as in already, as in it was always there. That's how the Zohar looks at it. Okay, so let's go on to the next bit. And I see, and behold, I see a great wind, a ruach se'ara, and so let me just look at, is there anything in the Sefer Yetzirah? We saw something along those lines. It was Kesufa. So I got confused. In the Sefer Yetzirah, Vision 6, it talks about Kesufa, like a whirlwind. Here is a stormy wind. There's a similarity to it. Whirlwind and a Se'ara, a stormy wind. In any case, he sees a stormy wind, Ba'aminatzafon, coming from the north, and we know the north, according to Kabbalah, and even earlier, is the correspondence to evil, to the Sitra Achra, to the other side. So the stormy wind comes from the north. Anan Gadol, a great cloud, the Eshmit Lakachat, and a self for this translates as flashing fire. Mit Lakachat is, I think we've seen in Encampments. That's what it's hit by air, so it's a reflexive word. Like it's self-taking, it takes from itself. I think Ari Kappa talks about it. But Nogalo Saviv, and there could be in the book in a space. He talks about it. He explains this whole vision there. The Nogalo Saviv, and a glow to it round about. Mitocha ke'en chashmal mitocha esh. Within that, within the glow, like the appearance, or like what appears to be something called chashmal within the fire. So here it says the gleam of amber. Now chashmal, it's in I think it's either in the Gemara. I think it's in the Gemara. Why is it? What is chashmal? Chashmal, I think it's a Gemara, yeah. Or it could be Midrash. Chashmal means it's a combination of two words, chash and mal. Sometimes it's chash, sometimes it's silent, sometimes it's mal. The chashmal is like the Ratzu B'Shov. So again, there's a parallel here with Elijah's vision, where he sees similar prints, similar ideas, wind, and I think he sees a cloud there as well. Where he sees a fire, he sees a thunder. He doesn't see a cloud. He sees a rash, earthquake or noise, and he says fire as well. But then he sees a kol mama dakai, thin, still, silent voice. There's the same idea here. Chashma is an interesting kind of thing. But again, I actually think the Zohar or the Ari makes a distinction between Kol Mama and the Chashmal, but I'm not sure this yet. I have to look it up. Anyway, it carries on. Umitocha demut arba. So this pasuk here is an important one. There are 4 principles here. In Ari is referred to the arba klipot, the 4 shells of the Sitra Achra. So it's important, these 4 shells. The Ruach Sahara, the great wind, the great the stormy wind, the great cloud, the fire, self-taking fire, and the glow around it. These refer to the 4 klipot, the 4 husks, the shells of the Sitra Achra. And this is and that's why I wanted to bring this idea, because we're going to come back to it later on. We'll start looking at the different manifestation of the sphere up there. Let's carry on. Mitocha demut arba chayot. Within that, I guess the chashmal, the appearance. Again, this idea of demut is important, and we'll come back to it in the next section. We look at Rambam. The appearance of 4 living chayot, 4 living creatures, 4 living beings. And this is their appearance. Demut adam lehena. They have the appearance of a man, of a person. The arba'ah panim. So again, I'm not going to interpret all of these things. I'm just going to rush. We're going to come back to possibly some of them. We will too. We're going to go through it and just to finish it, just to know what it's there. Arba'ah panim le'echat, and 4 faces to one. Arba'ah kanafayim le'echat lehem. Each one has 4 wings. Raglehem regel yeshara, and they have a single straight leg. V'chaf raglehem kaf. Kechaf regel egel, and the foot, or the calf is like the palm. So the sole of the foot, that's it, is like the foot is like the hoof of a calf. ונוצצים כעין נחושת כלל, and the sparks, not ניצוצות, like sparks, like we see in the Tzot HaKodesh, holy sparks, and they are like burnished bronze. וידי האדם מתחת כנפיהם, and they have the arms of a human, of a man beneath their wings, על ארבעת רבעיהן, on their four sides, ופניהם בכנפיהם לארבעתם, and the four of them had their let's just read the English. The four of them had their faces and their wings on their four sides. Right, there you go. Four faces, four wings, four arms. Yeah. חוברות אישה אל אחותה. So it says each one's wings were connected, one to the one next to it, to the achaya next to it. Lo yisabu belechtan, they did not turn when they moved. Ish el ever panav yelechu, each one moved in the direction of one of its faces. Utmut penehem peneh, and this is the appearance of their faces. Peneh adam, the face of a man. Peneh aryeh, face of a lion. El yamin, to the right. La'abatan, for each, all four of them have the face of the lion to the right. Peneh shov, small, and the face of an ox to the left. La'abatan, for four of them. Peneh nesher, la'abatan, and the face of an eagle. For all of them.
Just on that, by the way.
Yeah.
I think there's loads of commentary on all this, but just on the four animal faces.
Yeah.
Rebbe Nachman has something very interesting to say on it, and because he basically equates them, I think, with four different states of consciousness.
Oh wow, amazing.
Now, if I can try and find this, so I've definitely got one of them written down, and I know where it is in my book. Hang on. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, this one. Well, something about this. Yes, probably. This is all. Where's the message? It says like the ox is. Well, I have to find it, and then I have to get Likutim all run out and find that. But it is interesting anyway.
Yeah, no, I would like to listen. I'd like to hear it because I was actually looking for something interesting on that one.
Here we are.
If you can find it.
Hang on.
Got it?
Yeah. So hang on. I've got what the ox is written in front of me. I can look up the others now. Anyway, but the ox represents the brilliant light that augments the soul as a result of the scattered parts of the soul being gathered, causing the soul to shine more greatly.
Yeah, very interesting. But where does he get that from?
Well, hang on. So hang on. Volume 2, additional. Hang on. Let me go to my shelf. So remember, my version doesn't, unlike the Breslov Research Institute, doesn't give kind of that much background info.
Okay.
Let me have a look. Hang on. I'm at my shelf. It's 2. Right, let me go back to the room. Right. Okay, so it's additional lessons for 113. Right. Additional lesson for 13. Oh, here we are. Oh, it's big. Hang on. Okay. 4 chayot within the soul, and 4 in the Torah that carry the lion, the ox, the eagle, and the human. The lion represents I gathered my myrrh with my spices. Hang on. Oh, right. So this represents the bitterness of souls. So the lion is somehow the blemish of the souls, the blemish of the will. When one desires lust, this will is a blemish and embitters the soul. Now this person comes to the sage of the generation with a good will and a good soul. Subject takes all the wills and gathers them together in order to elevate them, and to gather all the wills and fallen souls. This is symbolized by lion, Aryeh, from the root word meaning gathering, and that he gathers the bitterness of the soul. That's quite interesting. Then he does the ox, which I've already said, which also talks about gathering.
Yeah.
The eagle represents the renewal of the soul acquired in its ascent into the category of ibur, gestation, which is symbolized by an eagle.
Okay.
The human, man represents the Lord, let us make man in our image, in our form, blah, blah, blah. When the souls are gathered in, they are then in the category of a human. Great souls with small souls corresponding to the poor and the wealthy. For not all wills are equal, since one person wants a lot while another wants only little. The lion, it then does more on the lion. Hang on, the lion of the Torah. The Torah is called stronger than the lion. The eagle represents renewal. So there's actually a lot more on this whole thing on the throne as well. But
Right.
all of these seem to go to the point, don't they? That it's about gathering and about integrating the bad souls are integrated with the good and other things. So it's very interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah. Does it say anything about Sphirot?
Not really. Not in the bit I just read.
Because it seems to me also that it connects to the 4 encampments of the desert as well. So that kind of hasn't because if you think about how it was, the Mishkan was in the middle, and then later on you see that there's the Kisei Kavod. So it's like the Mishkan is a Kisei Kavod. We'll see how actually that connects. I'll mention in a minute. But the 4 encampments again. So Judah is the Aryeh, right? So Judah is the line of Judah. So I'm wondering if the other ones are connecting to that as well.
Hang on. The throne carried by the living creatures of the soul corresponds to the soul of the sage, and that the sage's soul is enclosed in these souls.
Okay.
But actually, all the references are really to Tanakh, not to Zohar or anything.
Right. I mean, it's interesting actually you mentioned. Sorry, this is realized now because the Kabbalah says that. So the Chayot correspond to Olam Yetzirah, which is where the souls dwell, and Kisei Kavod corresponds to Olam Bria, which is where the souls of the Tzaddikim come from. So that's possibly where he's getting from with that. That makes sense now. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. Let's carry on so we don't take too long over it. And their faces and their wings are separated from above. Leish shtaim chovrot ish u'shtaim chasot et givyotehem. So for each one, 2 wings were connected to the other wing, to the other people, to the other being, and 2 covered their bodies. The ish el ever panav yelechu, and they each went according to the direction of their faces. El asher yeh shama haruach lalechet yelechu, wherever the wind impelled them to go, that is where they went. Lo yisabu belechtan, they did not turn when they moved. Udmut achayot.
Hang on, what does that mean? They moved with the wind, but they didn't move.
They didn't turn when they moved. Lo yisabu, they didn't turn when they moved.
It said they removed in the direction of any of its faces, but when they went without turning when they moved. What does it mean? They went straight on? Anyway,
They didn't turn. There was no turning. They maintained the same orientation when they moved.
right. Sorry. Thank you.
Right. ודמות החיות מראיהן כגחלי אש. So again, we saw גחלי אש in כגחלת קשורה לשלהבת. 1 second. Sorry, 1 second. So we saw this idea of gachelet כשלהבת הקשורה לגחלת in Sefer Yetzirah, regarding the end is a mid and the beginning the end. So similar idea here. Where am I? Right. So their appearance of the chayot was like the appearance. Demut of the Mariahin is interesting. Mariahin is what they look like. Demut is that's why the Demut will come interesting later. The likeness, which we'll look at next when we look at the Rambam. So the likeness of the chayot was like the appearance of burning coals, gachlet ba'avot, burning coals of fire. Kemareh halapidin, like the appearance of torches of fire, flames. He mithalechet ben there was appearance of this flame, torches, mithalechet ben achayot, which is moving between the chayot, v'noga la'esh, and they glow of fire. Min ha'esh yotzeh barak, and from that fire, lightning comes forth. I don't know what it's talking about, but let's look at the English. This fire suggested the torch kept moving about among the creatures. The fire had a radiance, and lightning issued from the fire. V'achayot. Actually, it might make sense when we look at the Sefer Yetzirah in the second section. We'll have to remember that and come back to it. And this is, we've seen this in the Sefer Yetzirah, we've repeated it many times, and the chayot were the living angels, the living creatures, were ratzu v'shov, running and returning, like the appearance of light. We saw both these expressions there in the Sefer Yetzirah. Vayareh chayot, and I saw the living creatures. Ezekiel speaking, V'hina ofan echad ba'aretz, and here I see a wheel on a single wheel on the ground. Etzel hachayot la'abat panav, for each one of its faces, or translation says for each of the four faced creatures. Mar'eh ha'ofanim u'ma'asehem ke'en Tarshish, the appearance of the wheels and their structures were like the appearance of Tarshish is this is beryl, I think it's like marble, something like that.
More like I read an article on this. It might be something like what's that blue, like lapis or something?
Lapis lazuli.
Might be lapis lazuli blue.
Yeah, really, Tarshish.
Possibly.
Tarshish is also the name of Carthage. Tarshish is called Tarshish.
Yeah. I think it might be. Yeah, might be. There's some debate about what it means. No one really knows, but yeah, possible lapis, possibly lapis.
Okay, I thought sapphire was possibly lapis.
Also.
Okay, man. And they had a single appearance to each one of them. And their appearance and their functioning, I think Ma'aseh will be functioning, or maybe their structure was like a wheel within a wheel. When each one of them moved, they moved in the direction of one of its four quarters. Again, like the chayot, they didn't turn when they moved. And I had to look at the translation here. The rims, their edges, and were tall. So their rims were tall, but it doesn't say I guess they had maybe it just says they had rims and they were very tall. And they were frightening. Begabotan meleot enaim, and their edges were full of eyes. Saviv la'abatan, around for all their sides, all their four sides. And when the chayot moved, the wheels also moved Islam with them. And when the chayot were elevated above the ground, also the wheels were raised above the ground. Wherever the wind impelled them to go, that's where they went. Also, Sham Haruach Alecha, they also went in that same direction of the wind. The Ha'ofanim Yinnaseu Leumatam, and the wheels went with were borne up with them, with the Chayot. Because the spirit of the Chayot is in the Ofanim, so they are connected like that. So we'll see this in Sefer Yetzirah because it mentions it. The Ofanim correspond to Olam Asiyah, the Chayot correspond to Olam Yetzirah. Okay. Belechtam yelechu ba'omdam yamodu, when they moved, when these moved, the other ones moved, and when these ones stood still, the other ones stood still also. When Asam ma'al ha'aret yinasu ha'ofanim, when the Zohar is referring to the Chayot, when the Chayot were raised above the ground, the wheels ha'ofanim were also raised above them with them. Lo matam ki ruach haya ba'ofanim, because the spirit of the Chayas and Ofanim is the same, almost exactly the same as the previous passage. Udmut al Rashi Chaya Rakia, and there's an appearance, there's a likeness above the heads of the Chaya, a firmament, like a sky, like the Kerech HaNorah, know what I mean? Like the expanse of wondrous ice. Kerech is ice, that's how we say ice, and this is crystal there. Natui ala rashehim melamala, which was spread out above their heads, above their heads, melamala, above. The tachat harakia kantehem yesharot, and below the firmament, their wings were straight. Isha elachota, each one corresponding to its fellow one. Leish shtayim mechasot lahena, each one covering parts of the body. So each one was covering the bodies. We see this idea of kol. We saw kol as well. Sefer Yetzirah, we'll see in the second section the idea of kol, the voice. And I heard the voice of their wings, the sound of their wings, and it was like the sound of rushing of great waters, like the sound of God when they move. Kol hamula, like the tumultuous noise. Kol machane, like the sound and the voice of an army. Again, that's why it's maybe connected to the idea of the machanot of the desert. When they settled, when they stood, their wings, I guess, but at the beginning their wings were straight. Now their wings, when they fly, their wings are straight. When they descend, their wings are loosened, droop. But he called me al-Rakia, and there was a sound above the firmament, asher al-Rosham, which is above their heads. Bamdam tarpena, again it's the same thing. Bamdam tarpena, when they stood still, their wings would droop. Ma'al Rakia asher al-Rosham, and above the firmament which was above their heads, like the appearance of the sapphire stone, like the appearance of a throne, of a chair. And upon the likeness of the chair, there is the likeness of the appearance of a person, alav melamana, above it, from above, upon the throne above it. Okay, and so that Adam would most likely be referring to the Sfirot, which is in the Tzurat Adam, the figure of man. And I saw like the appearance of Chashmal, which is the running and returning. which is in modern Hebrew chashmal means electricity, maybe alternating current. Kemar'eh esh bet la saviv, like so I saw in chashmal kemar'eh esh. I saw the appearance of chashmal, this thing of chashmal, which is the appearance of fire. Beit la saviv, like a housing for it, for the kiseh, I suppose, around about it. From the place of its loins and above, and from the place of its loins below, I saw like the appearance of fire, the noga lo saviv, and the appearance of this glow around about it, and even a glow around about it. So this glow, I'm assuming it's referring to, looks like the rainbow, which appears in the cloud beyom geshem, on a rainy day. Ken mareh noga. This is the same appearance as what the noga looked like, the surrounding glow. Hu mareh demut kevod Hashem. This is the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God. And I saw, and I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice speaking. So that's the whole of the chapter there. Really kind of fascinating stuff there. And we'll see these likenesses all over the place. We've already seen, we've seen these all this. We saw the appearance of the Sfirot coming out of Bazak. Again, this all is same connected to these ideas that we saw the Sfirot is like the vision of the person is like the Sfirot, like Olam Atzilut. So Yechezkel, the commentator Kabbalist, talk about this. He was standing in Yetzirah, and that's why the Chayot, he was seeing the Chayot primarily, and then above the Chayot he saw Olam Bria, and then Olam Atzilut, and below he saw the Ofanim, which is Olam Asiyah. So, about another way of looking at these things. First of all, later on, in the later chapter of Yechezkel, he sees these visions, the Chayot, and he says there the Chayot are the Kruvim. He says they are the cherubs. Now, this is an interesting one because we see cherubs as well in other places. We see cherubs in the temple, right? Now, I said already that the Kisei Kavod and the chariot, which is like this, think about, you're talking about this chair upon these living beings, which are upon wheels, like a chariot, moving chariot. And so this chariot, why did I say that? So this what Yechezkel is seeing here. Like later on, he says that these chayot are the kruvim the kruvim that he sees in the next vision are the same chayot he saw in this vision, and the kruvim appear in the temple. Right? And I already said that the chayot, it sounds like the encampment around a desert, and the Mishkan is surrounded by these, which is the Kisei Kavod also, which is the place of God, which is also like the chariot. The angels appear there, right? These kruvim appear there, which is the same chayot. And again, there's vision there, and God says to Moses, build the Mishkan and build the Aron HaKodesh, and upon the Aron HaKodesh you build these two kruvim, these two cherubs, and between these two cherubs I will speak to you, which is the same principle there. Between and above these two cherubs, these chayot, God, Hashem is manifesting as this Sfirot, through the Sfirot. To Yechezkel, to the prophets. So Ari Kaplan also mentions in other places that all the prophets used to meditate upon the space between the kruvim. So we see this vision of the kruvim there. So what is this idea of the chariot? So Yechezkel was a Kohen, right at the beginning. It says, the third pasuk, Devar Hashem Yechezkel ben Buzi Kohen. He was a Kohen, so he would have been in the temple, would have seen the temple, would have done service in the temple before he was sent into exile. And so this, I've seen this I actually saw this in a book on I can't remember what it's called. There was a book about the modern one written about Bavel. And I didn't realize at the time, but like it was really interesting how he says that what Yechezkel sees there is like, even though this temple has been destroyed, God, the temple now has wheels on it, right? So that's what he says often. The temple now has wheels, and so even though he's in the exile, God is still in this chariot, in the Beit Hamikdash, but it's a chariot now. It's Bashamayim, It's now kind of, it's almost like a reconciliation, saying that even though the temple's been destroyed, I can still appear to you here in this place, in this location, like wherever you are. That's possibly why it says specifically that I am amongst the exiles here. Another location of the Chayot is in the story of Adam and Chava after they eat from the tree of knowledge. We saw this last time, after they eat from the tree of knowledge. Actually, we didn't look at this specifically pasuk, but after they eat from the tree of knowledge, God sent them out. God places two cherubs at on the eastern side of the Garden of Eden to guard the way to the tree of life. And so when you walk into the Beit Hamikdash, you're facing west, but the Kruvim are the most eastern point of the Beit Hamikdash. So it's almost like those Kruvim, and between those Kruvim is like the entrance to Gan Eden there, actually, which is really interesting kind of concept there. Because Gan Eden opens us up to the Eitz Chaim, which is the Torah, which is Shuv Lamakom, which is who it meant to be. So the same principle there. Okay, so this is just a preliminary look at Yechezkel's vision, and we're going to return to again and again. I'm hoping to, and especially we'll look at this important one here, this passage number 4 here, about these Arba Klipot. In any case, that's where we are now. Let's look briefly for the next 10 minutes or so at, if you have time, how long have I actually been going for? Should we leave it till next week?
What's that? I'm okay for 10 more minutes.
It might be longer than 10 minutes though.
All right, a bit longer than 10 minutes.
Okay, fine. Let's go for it then. So, we'll be speaking about prophecy. Now let's look at the Rambam's definition of prophecy. So this is Moreh Nevuchim, second section, second part of 3 parts, and chapter 36. Yeah. So this is, I got the Kindle version here, but you've got it on Safari here.
Where do you get your translation these days? Because I use is it Pines, the famous one?
No, this is the Friedlander one.
Friedlander, yeah.
But I think the Pines one is better, or Pines one is better. Probably. I mean, it's more modern, so I'm sure it's just.
Yeah, Pines was 50s or 60s, I think.
Is it that? It's still quite old then. There you go.
Still old, yeah.
But this one is from the 19th century, isn't it? Or towards or at least the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, let's read it. So the Rambam says, prophecy is in truth and reality an emanation sent forth by the divine being through the medium of the active intellect. So we saw active intellect in reference to the right at the beginning, corresponding to the corporeal or non-corporeal entities which move the 10 spheres. The active intellect is the intelligence, one of the 10 intelligences which corresponds to the sublunary sphere, which is this universe, sublunary means the earth. So each one of the spheres has an intelligence corresponding to it, and the active intellect corresponds to this sphere. In his Hakdam, in his Hilchot Yetzirah Torah, the Rambam in Mishneh Torah, he there speaks about 10 levels of angels, and he doesn't talk about the active intellect there. He talks about the grade of angels called the Ishim, which mean the man angels, like human angels. And he says that when a prophet attains to prophecy, he becomes one of these angels. You kind of convert turned into one of these things. But maybe we can have a look at it actually. Maybe we'll do that next time to start it off. So I had to find it. I couldn't find it actually. So, but here he talks about the active intellect. So again, what we said last time, the 10 spheres correspond to the Olam Ha'asiyah. The 10 intelligences correspond to Lama Yetzirah. So therefore, this active intellect kind of corresponds to the Ofanim, possibly. Maybe. In any case, the active intellect in the Abalafia corresponds to Memtet, to the angel Memtet, which he actually does talk about as Malchut. I think Sulam Aliyah talks about it as Malchut. Yeah, so that would be the 10th lowest sphere. Okay, so an emanation sent forth by the divine being through the medium of the active intellect. In the first instance, man, so prophecy is an emanation sent forth by the divine being through the medium of the active intellect, in the first instance to man's rational faculty, and then to his imaginative faculty. It is the highest degree and greatest perfection man can attain. It consists in the most perfect development of the imaginative faculty. Prophecy is a faculty that cannot in any way be found in the person or acquired by man through a culture of his mental and moral faculties. But even if these latter were as good and perfect as possible, they would be of no avail unless they were combined with the highest natural excellence of the imaginative faculty. Now we saw previously about the intellect and imagination, how the Rambam is almost like anti-imagination. He speaks negatively against it. But here we see that he says that without a perfected imaginative faculty, a human being cannot attain to prophecy at all. However morally perfect and however intelligent you are, you cannot attain to prophecy at all. You know that the full right. You know that the full development. So he's saying you know. So the Moed Bachim was written as a letter to a student, which was then published. You know that the full development of any faculty of the body, such as the imagination, depends on the condition of the organ by means of which the faculty acts. So a very kind of materialistic view of human functioning. This must be the best possible as regards its temperament and its size, and also as regards the purity of its substance. So you have to eat well and sleep well. Any defect in this respect cannot in any way be supplied or remedied by training. For when any organ is defective in its temperament, proper training can, in the best case, restore a healthy condition to some extent, but cannot make such an organ perfect. But if the organ is defective as regards size, position, or as regards the substance of the matter which the organ is formed, there is no remedy. You know all this, and I need not explain it to you at length. Part of the imagination. So, do you want to question that? Do you want to talk about that? Let's leave it as it is.
All right.
You're right. You'll leave it as it is. Okay. Part of the functions of the imaginative faculty is, as you all know, to retain impressions. So now he's describing what the imagination does. So part of it is to retain impressions by the senses, to combine them and chiefly to form images. So it's memory. So first of all, the imagination is there as a faculty of memory, but also in terms of because it's connected to memory, it combines those memories together and it forms images. The principal and highest function is performed when the senses are at rest and pause in their action, for then it receives to some extent divine inspiration in the measure as it is predisposed for this influence. So when if our physical sensations if our senses are stimulated, then our imagination doesn't work properly or is impaired to some extent. That's when we go to sleep and close our eyes, our imaginative faculty can work without being impeded by sensory stimulation. So I'm just thinking about something. Right. Okay. So this is, and now that's what he says. This is the nature of those dreams which prove. Okay. So he says when the function, when our senses are at rest and pause in their action, for then it receives to some extent divine inspiration and the measure as it is predisposed for this influence. This is the nature of those dreams that prove true and also of prophecy, the difference being the one of quantity and not of quality. So dreams and prophecy are exactly the same thing. The difference is quantity and not of quality. Thus, our sages say the dream is the 60th part of prophecy, and no such comparison will be made between two things of different kinds. We cannot say that the perfection of man is so many times the perfection of a horse, not the same substance. Bereshit Rabbah, the following saying of our sages occurs: dream is the nobelet, the unripe fruit of prophecy. This is an excellent comparison for the unripe fruit. Nobelet is so nevuah. Nobelet is the same. Nevuah. The idea of nobelet is a connection there between the words. So he says the unripe fruit is really the fruit to some extent. Only it has fallen from the tree before it was fully developed and ripe. In a similar manner, the action of the imaginative faculty during sleep is the same as at the time when it receives a prophecy. Only in the first case it is not fully developed. It has not yet reached its highest degrees. If we perfect our imagination, which is one of the things we're going to be doing, trying to achieve in the second section, so maybe we'll spend some time on that practically. How do we do that? But he's saying that when we can do that, then we can really kind of see prophecy. So again, this is why I think it's connected to lucid dreaming and the ability to really kind of see that. So one of the things that Stephen LeBurge in his book on lucid dreaming, he's an expert on. He's a doctor of lucid dreaming. He's at the center in Hawaii. Last time I heard, but he says that dreams are always occurring. It is just that when we are awake, we're not aware of it. So there's always imagery there taking place. So again, you can see this when you go to bed at night. If you try, if you're trained in this thing, which hopefully will try to move towards that to some extent, is that when you close your eyes, you'll be able to see images there and really. And we'll see what he says later on, but he explains it to some extent. Right, so the reason why we don't have full prophecy when we're dreaming is because we haven't perfected our imagination yet. But why need I quote the words of the sages when I can refer to the following passages of scripture? Quote, if there be among you a prophet, I the Lord will make myself known unto him in a vision, in a dream I will speak to him. From Numbers 12:6. Here the Lord tells us what real prophecy is, that it is a perfection acquired in a dream or in a vision. The original mar'eh is a noun derived from the verb ra. I'm not sure if that's in the Hebrew or in the original Arabic actually. The imaginative faculty acquires such an efficiency in its action that it sees the thing as if it came from without. So this is what he talks about. This is why, again, like I said, why it's lucid dreaming. So in a lucid dream, we are seeing something as though it is outside of ourselves. So you can sometimes, if you can train yourself in imagination, in your imaginative faculty, you can start to see things as if they're actually there. So it requires such an efficiency in its action that it sees the thing as if it came from without, as if it's not your own imagination, and perceives it as though through the medium of bodily senses. Okay, for me that sounds like lucid dreaming. These two modes of prophecy, vision and dream, include all its different degrees. So again, vision is when you're awake, and dream is when you're asleep. It is a well-known fact that the thing which engages greatly and earnestly man's attention whilst he's awake and in the full position of his senses forms during his sleep the object of the action of his imaginative faculty. It's a long sentence, but basically this is what Gemara says as well, that Ma'im lo, I can't remember what the words are, Ma'im lo be'adam along the lines of they show a person in his dreams that which we thought about during the day. So this is what he says. He doesn't say it from quotation from the Gemara, but he says it as a fact. It is known that whatever you think about during the day is what you're going to dream about at night time. So people who are used to playing video games right before they go to bed, you'll realize, you'll notice that you'll see those things continue whilst you are when you're trying to get to sleep. So he says, imagination is then only influenced by the intellect insofar as it is predisposed for such an influence. So he says, very important principle here, that if you want to have visions of clarity or dreams of clarity, then you have to engage your intellect. If you want to be able to, so he says that if you think, whatever thoughts you're thinking about, if you're thinking that no good thoughts, if you're thinking about food, you're going to be dreaming about food. But if you think about intellectual matters, if you think about God, you're going to be dreaming about those things. And if you practice your intellect, if you work on acquisition of truth, then you're going to be training yourself to acquire that with your imagination also. So imagination is then only influenced by the intellect insofar as it is predisposed for such influence. Again, we'll see why is this relevant, because we're going to see the same principles. We're going to look at them from the perspective of the Sfirot. We're going to look at them from the perspective of the Sefer Yetzirah in a sense. So this intellect is very important. He'll say so in a minute. So it will be quite. So he says here, it will be quite useless to illustrate this by a simile or to explain it fully, as it is clear and everyone knows it. It is like the action of the senses, the existence of which no person with common sense would ever deny. So he's saying that whatever you think about is what you're going to be dreaming about. Think intelligent thoughts, you're going to have intelligent dreams. After these introductory remarks, you'll understand that a person must satisfy the following conditions before he can become a prophet. The substance of the brain must be from the very beginning in the most perfect condition as regards purity of matter, composition of its different parts, size and position. No part of his body must suffer from ill health. He must in addition have studied and acquired wisdom so that his rational faculty passes from the state of potentiality to that of actuality. This is an Aristotelian concept of koach lepoel, so principle action, potentiality to actuality. So we all have potentiality for whatever, for a whole bunch of different things, but it's not unless we actualize it. It is kind of irrelevant. So it must be actualized. We have a rational faculty. We must actualize our rational faculty. His intellect must be as developed and perfect as human intellect can be. His passions pure and equally balanced. All his desires must aim at obtaining a knowledge of the hidden laws and causes that are in force in the universe. His thoughts must be engaged in lofty matters. His attention directed to the knowledge of God, to the consideration of his works, which the Hebrew says hashgacha there, and of that which he must believe in this respect. There must be an absence of the lower desires and appetites, as you see, we're very kind of anti-physical pleasure here, the ascetic kind of thing, which runs as a theme throughout Rambam and I guess medieval thinking. There must be an absence of the lower desires and appetites of the seeking after pleasure in eating, drinking and cohabitation, and in short, every pleasure. My thing is gone. Every pleasure connected with a sense of touch. Aristotle correctly says that this sense is a disgrace to us since we possess it only in virtue of our being animals, and it does not include any specifically human element. Whilst enjoyments connected with other senses as smell, hearing, and sight, though likewise of a material nature, may sometimes include intellectual pleasure, appealing to man as man, according to Aristotle. You want to have any questions on that one? Or comments on that one?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, you could have lots. I mean, for starters, I don't really get, even under his own system, how it matters if your leg's broken, from his point of view. So that one sort of stands out as being, why. Maybe actually that's probably not Aristotelian. It's more from like, you shouldn't go into the temple if you're lame.
Yeah.
So it might
but do you think he's actually talking about a broken leg or into?
No, I think it's something. No, more like deformity.
We say no part of his body must suffer from ill health. What about like if you remember you had your backache?
Yeah.
So maybe that's maybe he's like it's difficult for you to have a prophetic vision if you have a backache.
Like,
he said,
if like Ezekiel, suddenly got like stomach ulcers, it's like doesn't stop being a prophet.
No, but he does, because you can't receive prophecy, because he says before that prophecy is that it is only when a prophecy works most effectively when it's not distracted by a sensory stimulus. So he says that. So if you have stomach ulcers, if Ezekiel had stomach ulcers, he would in that moment he wouldn't be a prophet because he's not receiving a prophecy. He's not capable of receiving a prophecy because he's distracted by sensory stimulus.
You think he'd be past that?
Well, maybe he was past it. Well, that's a good point, actually. Okay, interesting.
Anyway, there's other, of course, there are other things as well. I mean, it's interesting, of course, rather like, Abulafia, the definition of prophecy is obviously radically changed from what we might think of as biblical prophecy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Rambam here is talking about biblical prophecy as in visions. But
that is true. Yeah, no, you're right. But I don't think necessarily that the visions stuff and it being in tune with your imaginative faculty being in tune with the divine is one thing, but I'm not sure all the Aristotelian requirements would have had to have been met by like Eliyahu or whatever. It's something that may have been more of a gift from God, even even if they didn't have all these Aristotelian elements.
Yeah.
I mean, Rambam in a way wants to sort of say, it's the ideal Aristotelian philosopher, but it may be that Hashem gives prophecy to those he wants to give it to. It's in a way it kind of similar to Abu Afia in a way. There's this kind of I wouldn't say to erase grace, but like there's this debate among medieval Jewish philosophers about whether really if you do X, Y, and Z you'll get there.
Yeah.
Or whether actually no, it's not all X, Y, and Z. Maybe there's a bit of X, Y, and Z, but actually it's a gift. You just need a gift from God.
Yeah, I mean, the Rambam does talk about that. Actually, he makes it because he does make that distinction. I don't know if it's in this chapter, but he makes that distinction that the difference between his vision of prophecy and Aristotle's vision of prophecy is that with Aristotle there is no minia, there is no something which prevents it outside of it. So it's all within his power, according to Aristotle. So if you perfect these three faculties, then you will automatically receive prophecy. Whereas for Rambam, that's not the case. He says that even if you perfect these faculties, you still require grace in order to actually receive a prophecy. But you can't receive a prophecy without having perfected these faculties. And actually, I think I kind of agree with him in that kind of sense. I think you need some kind of training in order to have some kind of vision, or some kind of predisposition or something like that. Some kind of even if you don't have training, at least you have to be, from birth, some kind of perfect in these three areas according to the Rambam, I'd say.
Okay, fine.
So he carries on. This remark, although forming no part of our subject is not superfluous. For the thoughts of the most renowned wise men are to a great extent affected by the pleasures of this sense, and filled with a desire for them. And yet people are surprised that the scholars do not prophesy. If prophesying be nothing but a certain degree in the natural development of a man. 1 minute. Did you understand that? This remark, although not forming part of our subject, is not superfluous. So he's saying that it's not superfluous, this idea about touch, for the thoughts of the most renowned wise men are to a great extent affected by the pleasure of this sense. So because you can be, however wise may be, you can be affected by the pleasure of this sense and filled with a desire for them. And yet people are surprised that these scholars do not prophesy. And these people don't prophesy, but because they believe prophesying to be nothing but a certain degree in the natural development of man. Right? So this interesting is that within Chassidut, they come to argue with this, actually. And you can see that in Chassidut, they say that through pleasure, there's a different, that we can still enjoy things. So it's interesting that within Chassidut, and actually, I guess in like later Kabbalah, that we don't deny pleasure. Or Shabbat, we can experience pleasure, and that's not considered disgrace to us.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, the medievalists particularly come down hard on it. Of course, Talmud is not that hard. It's a mixed picture. The medievalists who really go to town on being anti-pleasure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, interesting. So let's just. I mean, we can. I think it's important to consider what he's saying there as well. Okay, let's carry on. It is further necessary to suppress every thought or desire for unreal power. I mean, don't forget that what we said, what we saw about Ishtadlut Deoraita with Beit Yaakov. He said that it comes through the cessation of our ta'avot, of the desires of the body. That the distractions we have towards this world and the murkiness of our consciousness, of our awareness, is what prevents us from hearing the divine word. So that's not so different to what he's saying here. And I think just like you said before, that it's about our ability to move beyond it. We're not under the dominion of those desires.
Your favorite line is coming up.
That is to say, for victory. That is to say, for victory, increase of followers. So it is necessary to suppress every thought of desire for these things. For victory, increase of followers. This is good for Instagram. If it said increase, I don't know if he had that in mind. Maybe he did have it in mind. Acquisition of honor and service. Sorry, I'm now going into a funny mood now. Increase followers on YouTube as well, I suppose.
It is the same point. It is exactly the same point.
Right, yeah. It is. It's just so. It's almost like he wrote it for the 21st century. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Acquisition of honor and service from the people without any ulterior object. On the contrary, the multitude must be considered according to their true worth. Some of them are undoubtedly like domesticated cattle, behemoth in Hebrew, and others like wild beasts, chayot. And these only engage the mind of the perfect and distinguished man so far as he desires to guard himself from injury. I really I love the Rambam for this section.
Wonderful.
It's just so funny how he writes it. In case of contact with them.
He shows this wonderful misanthropy, which I'm a big fan of.
It's hilarious, this one. To derive some benefit from them when necessary. Right. There was a story I heard from there was this. I heard it from Rabbi Weinberger in one of his shiurim. He says that there was this. I can't remember who it was referring to, but there was a Litvak, Misnagid, non-Hasidic rabbi went to visit a Hasidic Rebbe, and all the Hasidim would climb on top of each other, to come to the front, or whatever it is. And the Litvak he shouts Chayas, Chayas, and the Rebbe says Chayas HaKodesh.
Yeah, very good.
And which is obviously what we saw just now, Chayas HaKodesh. A man who satisfies these conditions, so he doesn't care about Instagram followers or becoming an influencer or anything else. A man who satisfies these conditions whilst is fully. Again, I think this is important because again, forget that he was reading Al-Ghazali. He was reading the Sufi. What's it called? The scholars, Rambam. And I think you can see within this a Sufi kind of element to it, which is the moving away from the need for praise from other people. So he actually does talk about hishtavut as a sense of not caring about being honored or receiving praise from other people, like being dissatisfied whether somebody praises you or curses you. It means nothing to you. I think we see this. That's also in Chovot HaLevavot. It's in Yitzhak bin Akko. It's in the Rambam as well somewhere. I can't remember where exactly, but I think it's in his Pirush Mishnah somewhere. But he mentions this.
Mishneh Torah has the famous story of him being on the boat.
Is that in the Mishneh Torah or Pirush Mishnah out?
I think it's Mishneh Torah.
Are you sure?
No.
There's no stories in the Mishneh Torah.
Then I'm probably wrong.
It must be Pirush Mishnah out. So so that one about the boat. So again, it's the same principle of like so again, I see that thread through it, and that's one of the things about the Sufis is that they used to very early on, there was this sense of, this would have been before the Rambam, there was this sense of looking like a peasant. Right? They would wear like rags, and they would look like disheveled. They looked like homeless, and nothing to look at. So it was a way of breaking down the ego and not looking like anything special. And that was a kind of a mila, to do that. So again, I see this thread there, and again, don't forget that his descendants, Abraham and Rambam, and generations of Maimonidean leaders practice a form of Jewish Sufism. And we will likely look at, we will. B'ezrat Hashem, we will look at Avraham and Rambam and some of the other. B'ezrat Hashem, we will throughout the series. Anyway, so he goes, a man who satisfies these conditions so if you satisfy these conditions of not having any desire for physical pleasure, as he spoke about the perfected intellect, I can't remember. Anyway. Whilst his fully developed imagination is an action, again, don't forget, see he's doing it as in action before Alex. It's acting, like the active intellect. It is non-potential. That's why again, it's like if somebody is not currently, if you're not like, currently you're not a lawyer because you're not doing any lawyering right now, right? You're only a lawyer when you're at work, right? So that's kind of what it's referring to. Yeah. When your imagination factor is an action influenced by the active intellect according to his mental training, such a person will undoubtedly perceive nothing but things very extraordinary and divine, and see nothing but God and his angels. His knowledge will only include that which is real knowledge, and his thought will only be, be directed to such general principles as would tend to improve the social relations between man and man. So again, this last point, let's look at it again. And his thought will only be directed to such general principles that will tend to improve the social relations between man and man. So he will seek the benefit of people. He will seek to create a general increase in qualities between, or relations between people. Again, this is an amazing kind of idea here. I think we should put this on a wall, maybe a little bit. These ideas. We have thus described three kinds of perfection: mental perfection acquired by training, perfection of the natural constitution of the imagination faculty, and moral perfection produced by the suppression of every thought of bodily pleasures and of every kind of foolish or evil ambition. These qualities are, as is well known, possessed by the wise men in different degrees, and the degrees of prophetic faculty vary in accordance with this difference. Faculties of the body are, as you know, at one time weak, wearied, and corrupted, at others in a healthy state. Imagination is certainly one of the faculties of the body. You find, therefore, that prophets are deprived of the faculty of prophesying when they mourn, are angry. Here's right for you. When they mourn, when they're angry, or they have stomach ulcers, or are similarly affected. Our sages say inspiration does not come upon a prophet when he is sad or languid. Again, this idea of being sad is an important principle in Breslov and in Hasidus in general, of not being sad. This is the reason why Jacob did not receive any revelation during the period of his mourning, when his imagination was engaged with the loss of Joseph. So we have to have a bara, like are we learning what's it called, the Bnei Machshava Tova, and he talks about the purification, the clarification of our machshava, of our thoughts, our thinking process. So this is the reason why Jacob did not receive any revelation when he was in the period of mourning, when his imagination was engaged with the loss of Joseph. The same was the case with Moses when he was in a state of depression through the multitude of his troubles, which lasted from the murmurings of the Israelites in consequence of the evil reports of the spies, till the death of the warriors of that generation. So 40 years. He received no message of God as he used to, even though he did not. So again, even Moses didn't have prophecy for 40 years. He did not receive prophetic inspiration through the medium of the imagination faculty, but directly through the intellect. So he received no message of God. So let's look at this again. He received no message of God as he used to, even though. So even though he did not. Earlier on in the previous chapter, he says that Moshe was the only prophet who doesn't receive prophecy through the imagination. He receives prophecy directly through the intellect. So even though his imagination, his mind, his memories wasn't preoccupied with thoughts about the things, about depression, he received no message, and even though he did not receive prophetic inspiration through the medium of his imagination faculty, but directly through the intellect, he still did not receive a prophecy for 40 years. So even then, when the intellect is not, we have mentioned it several times that Moses did not, like other prophets, speak in similes. This will be further explained in chapter 45, but it's not the subject. But it's not the subject of the present chapter. There were also persons who prophesied for a certain time and then left off altogether. Something occurring that caused them to discontinue prophesying. The same circumstances were prevalence of sadness and dullness was undoubtedly the direct cause of the interruption of prophecy during exile. So he says that exile, according to Chazal, was ended in prophecy ended in exile. Ezekiel was one of the exceptions, and others as well. Can there be any greater misfortune for man than this? To be a slave bought for money in the service of ignorant and voluptuous masters, and powerless against them as they unite in themselves the absence of true knowledge and the force of all animal desires. So interesting is that if we learn how to transcend this, if we learn how to transcend our fears and our desires and all that kind of thing, which is really kind of part of what meditation is all about, part of the process which we're trying to move to, that shuvla makam, returning to the place, then we can do this even within the exile, just like Yechezkel and others. Such an evil state has been prophesied to us in the world, in the words, they shall run to and fro to seek the word of God, but shall not find. Again, running to and fro, ratzu, 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 they're running. This is an Amos. Amos was a prophet who prophesied in exile, I think. Wasn't he? Was he? No.
Can't remember.
I don't know, actually. I'll look it up, actually. Maybe he wasn't, actually. But again, when we see how they are running to and fro. They're not returning. They need to, instead of ratzu b'shov, they're ratzu. They're running to and fro, looking for the word of God. But actually, the word of God is when we return, just like we see in the Beit Yaakov. But they shall not find. Again, don't forget that Ishtalut D'Oraita, that is the word of God. The Torah is the word of God. So when we do Ishtalut D'Oraita, which is Sur Mirah, refrain from evil, returning to silence, returning to a place of transcendence of self, where there is, when you have transcended self, there is no feelings of desires or anything like that. Then the word, that's when the Torah manifests, the notel ki natal alav, because you receive reward from learning the Torah. Her king, her princes are among the nations. The law is no more. The Torah is no more. Her prophets also find no vision from the Lord. Again, this is in Sefer Yetzirah. This is the chapter before Yeshiv Badad B'Edom. I think, yeah. So it's the same principle. The Torah. I think, is it the Torah no more? I think I need to look up this in the original. 1 second. The gates, which likely a synonym for Torah, the yeshivas, because they used to learn by the gates. The gates are sunk into the earth, swallowed up by the ibed v'shiber berichecha. What does that mean? The broken, smashed her bars to bits. I don't think that means bars where you go to drink. Malka, Visareha Vagoim en Torah. Yeah, en Torah. The king and his messengers are in exile. Her king and her leaders are in exile, and there is no Torah. En Torah. Gam nevieha lo matzu chazon Hashem. Again, we're finding these. This is what I love about these things. We're finding the same connections there. En Torah, because in Torah, gam nevieha lo matzu chazon Hashem. Because it's the same principle. Torah leads us to that. Ishtalut D'Oraita leads us to back to the vision of Tzviatan, the vision of the Sfirot. So this is a real fact, and the cause is evident. The prerequisites of prophecy have been lost. In the Messianic period, may it soon come, prophecy will therefore again be in our midst, as has been promised by God. That's a great place to end, because it's a little bit of reconciliation for us there. So Yeah, and I see this same principle with the Shev Badad Bidom. Let him sit alone and be silent, which is the next chapter of, I believe correctly, it's the next chapter of Echa. I said 10 minutes, but I told you it'd be longer 10 minutes. It's been 20,
It's okay.
37
Yeah.
minutes.
I better race off actually.
Yeah.
Do some admin.
Roland, I have a question.
Yeah.
I've been getting up real early the last few mornings, and I'm trying to direct my dreams, and I have no success. The Rabbi Gigi, what's coming? Thoughts from other, trying to direct dreams to something I want to get answers to, or try to think of at the moment, but it works. I never seem to get, and I can never gear. I don't know what I should do. I don't know if I'm able to do it. I certainly tried the last 2 days. No
What method
success.
are you using?
Well, I'm just, I'm just getting up early. I'm just lying there with my eyes open and realizing what I want, closing my eyes, and sure enough, I'm so tired. I got up twice this morning after a 1 hour dream and another 1 hour dream, but it was things totally a couple of days ago, not what I was thinking about at the moment that I really wanted to do it.
Right. I mean, are you using a method, or are you following a particular method?
I'm interested. I wasn't using a method. I was just trying to visualize it in my head.
So that's actually a good. That's what you've tapped into a good way of doing it. What you need to do at that point is, first of all, when you first you're still dreaming when you first wake up for the first few seconds of being awake. So what you need to try to make sure you maintain awareness in that moment, and then go straight into a dream. So there's different ways of doing it. First of all, don't move your body, don't open your eyes, and don't think in the sense of you're using kind of your rational faculty to kind of do anything. What you want to do is you want to use your imaginative faculty. So there are techniques that you can do. I can send you a book actually which talks about the exact technique. All you need is just the techniques there. So there's a few so one way of doing it is to what I do is I try to see images. I try to kind of really kind of create vivid images in that moment, and then as I see those images, I kind of like imagine myself kind of grabbing onto these images and latching onto these images physically, and then kind of turning around. So there's certain things you can do, like trying to move, which we're gonna be exploring these techniques actually during the imagination section of this series. So I'll bring it up. I'll bring it. But if you want, I'll give you a reference to this book. There's a book called The Phase by Michael Rodiger, and it's all about lucid dreaming, and it's really good. It like works really well. He guarantees you lucid dreaming within 3 days, and actually for me it worked within 2 days. So
okay.
I'll send it to you. Yeah, because all you need is just the techniques, really. Look by the sounds of it.
I'm lacking technique. I'm just trying to do it, just winging it. It's not working.
Yeah. But your intuition is correct, because that's for me, that's the best way of doing it. When you wake up in the morning, like first thing when you wake up, and then go straight into it. Okay, so Zat Hashem, I'll send that to you, and look forward to I'm excited with this new section. So hopefully
can I ask you something about the Cerruti box? You put
I'm not gonna let me end the what's it called?
okay.
The recording.